We're talking with the two candidates for Ohio Secretary of State. Greg Hart is the Republican candidate, and Jennifer Brunner is the Democratic candidate. And I'd like to talk to you about the enfranchisement of voters, or whatever you want to call it. We'll start with Greg. Do you feel that there's any large-scale disenfranchisement of any given blocks of voters in Ohio? And is there a reason for it? If there is there a reason for it?
I don't think there's large-scale disenfranchisement right now. I'd like to start answering this question by saying that one of my priorities as Secretary of State is going to be to get more people involved in our system. That is a huge priority for those of us in government, and especially in the Secretary of State's office. The numbers of people registered and people voting is woeful and unacceptable. And part of my job will be to be aggressive about conducting registration drives, getting more people involved, including young people. We got to get them early. We got to get them involved in our system. I will say we've got two new rules among many others in elections this year. One involving an identification requirement at the polls, which I think is a good common sense safeguard to keep voter fraud out of our system. I think any argument that's disenfranchise of voters in the state is just not true. The evidence does not exist for it. Additionally, there are new requirements that we know who the individuals are who are out in the communities around the state of Ohio registering voters. That provides some accountability to the process. We had over 500 fraudulent voter registration forms submitted to the Board of Elections in Franklin County just last week. We know who the people are who are registering those voters. That's accountability, and that's very important to keep fraud out of the system. Appearance is very important in elections and in government, and it's very important that the head of the Secretary of State's office maintain the appearance of being bipartisan. As I've said before, we run partisan elections. When you get to the office, you've got to run the office in the most bipartisan way. For that reason, I've stayed out of presidential campaigns and also stayed out of chairing any other campaigns when I'm Secretary of State and also while I'm running.
Jennifer, how would you respond to that?
Well, can you repeat the question, because Greg's entered into so many additional things that I think we lost sight of the original question.
I asked basically about, do you think there's any, what do you think about disenfranchisement of voters in Ohio, and does this exist on any kind of a large-scale measure? This
is where Greg Hartman and I differ very, very greatly. The voter registration rules that were promulgated and subsequently adopted by the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review, but that were promulgated by Secretary of State Blackwell, place a person performing voter registration in peril of being charged with up to a 5th-degree felony. Now, my opponent would suggest that it should be a 4th-degree felony, which is an additional 6 months in prison. But if a person's registering voters, whether they're compensated or uncompensated, they are required to personally turn in their voter registration form in person or by mail, and they can't submit it to their group to do a quality check on the voter registration and have the group send the form in. And this is pretty much stymied many of the good government voter registration groups who regularly provide this process. You see, if our state government were doing what it was supposed to do, such as the Department of Job and Family Services providing voter registration services to people who are in less fortunate circumstances than any of the four of us sitting here and who are very transient, we wouldn't have to have the good government groups, the charitable groups, filling in, but it's not doing its part. And so as people move and they don't update their registration form because they're living in a poverty situation or in the tyranny of the moment, and situation I would dare say any of us would be hard-pressed to be able to cope with, then they're disenfranchised. And we've got that plus the voter ID requirements, and I disagree with what Mr. Hartman has to say, because it's not only people living in poverty, it's older people living in nursing homes who are no longer driving, it's college students who don't have a driver's license here in Ohio and who may not have a bank account and who are living in a dorm. They're going to be relegated to voting a provisional ballot. And if you look at the implementation of provisional ballots under House Bill 3, as Secretary of State Blackwell has set out, there will be forms to fill out by the poll worker, by the provisional voter. There'll be follow-up within 10 days if they don't have the proper ID, and this is going to greatly increase the length of the lines and cause the disenfranchisement of people who simply don't have the time to wait. It's predicted that the voter turnout this fall will be more than 50%, and I think we're headed for a real problem if something doesn't occur before this November election.
Well, let me follow that up before Dave brings up another topic. Jennifer, and then Greg. You can be so persuasive in getting the people registered. You can register everybody that's old enough to vote now. You can have 100% registration, but half of them won't vote on election day. You said over 50% will probably vote this year. That means around 50% won't vote. So how do you convince everybody it's a good idea to vote? All the people that are registered but don't even bother, and therefore if they don't vote for a certain length of time, they go off the polls. How do you get them interested?
Well, there are some tried and true ways to do that. With the passage of House Bill 234, 17 and 18-year-olds are now allowed to work at the polls, and Kids Voting has actually participated in that process in Franklin County. And in doing their follow-up studies, what they found is that these young people have said, because I've been a poll worker, I am more likely to be a lifelong voter, and the people who are around me and my family are more likely to vote. So one of the things that I've proposed to do is to find ways to bring in more people to be able to serve as poll workers, including allowing for the split shifts so that one person doesn't have to work a 14-hour day. I mean, right now we get an older person who is really the only one eligible with time-wise to work a 14-hour day, and that's a tough day for anyone. So we allow for split shifts, we allow for new ways for poll workers to be recruited, and we train them right before the election, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday, so it's still fresh in their mind. So that way we actually improve the voting situation for those who are voting. That's one example. There'll be many more.
Greg, how would you address the fact that a lot of people are registered but not a large percentage of them vote?
Well, I mean, a top priority of mine is to get more people engaged in the process. I think, big picture, we got to have people running for office that drive aggressive agendas when they win. I think a lot of the population today says it doesn't matter who wins these races. I think what I bring to the table, I come to politics and government from a different background, having run a business, and I've left footprints in the clerk of court's office while I've been there. I've automated that office, and when I get to the Secretary of State's office, I'm running to make a difference in that office. I think that's a significant problem. We got to get young people a message and a view that they can make a difference, that there are differences between the candidates. Second, big picture, the Secretary of State has got to make it a priority to get younger people engaged in the process. And one of my 20 points in my 20-point plan for the Secretary of State's office is to get college kids involved and give them 1 credit hour for helping us put our elections on. We've got, as we've discussed, major turnover in how we run our elections all over the state. We need some younger people involved to put these elections on. A lot of computerization now has entered the polling place, and we need a younger breed of poll workers to augment the existing poll worker population we have. So I'm going to make it a priority. It's a priority now. I talk about it everywhere I go, and we need to start by agreeing that the participation in our process right now is unacceptable, and we've got to get started at getting people interested in this process.